Welcome to my second YouTube, arguably the best.
No, YouTube sucks.
Or at least the second best. So today's topic is Trump's share market. Joining us, the latest press secretary, Kenny McEnany, and Professor of Economics, Marty Pants. So first question, is it real? Obama's birth certificate? Not a chance. Yes, a birth certificate.
I thought he was probably born in this country, and now I really have a much bigger doubt than I did before.
But based on what?
And you know what? His grandmother in Kenya said he was born in Kenya, and she was there.
But no, I was referring to Trump. Oh, Trump. Everything's real. The businessman persona, the hair and the skin, the golf score, the marriage. I was referring to your president's Dow Jones. Let me show you a clip to give us context.
It's a sacred number, 30,000. Nobody thought they'd ever see it. That's the 9th time since the beginning of 2020. And it's the 48th time that we've broken records during the Trump administration.
Well, if you check this graph, I think you would agree it's pretty impressive. In fact, I have a photo that captures the excitement.
I think we all know that indexes are viewed logarithmically. For the sake of the viewers, I'll explain. If you have an index that delivers a constant return of 10%, it would look like this. You can invest any time in the 100 years and your return will be the same. Just because the final year went up by 12,628 points versus 1 point in the first year, there's no difference. Here's a Dow Jones over nearly a century with a logarithmic y-axis, vertical axis. Even before COVID, the performance was ordinary.
I disagree. Sorry, Mr. McEnany. It's very important. The president's ratings were well down. He needed a boost. You mean opinion polls? No, ratings. You can hardly hold a press conference to say that you're down by 1 point. This isn't soccer. This is proper entertainment. Professor, you said Trump's market was ordinary. Would you care to elaborate?
Here are all the American presidents.
Trump's main adversary's market. Rosie McDonald has a market.
No, Barack Obama's market actually outperformed Trump, and Clinton's outperformed both.
I hate that Barack guy. Moving along. Professor, the Dow Jones is made up of 30 companies. Are these companies a good representation of the US economy?
They are household names like Apple, Microsoft,
McDonald's, Coca-Cola, Mr. Trump's lunch order. Oh, I forgot about his last medical. Almost obese. Make that a Diet Coca-Cola.
Diet?
No, he doesn't diet. We just made him taller. 6'3". Pity that Trudeau is 6'2". Hard to explain. There are some big omissions from the Dow Jones. Amazon and Google, for example.
Their share prices are too high, so they're out. ExxonMobil got too low, so that's out. The index is price weighted. Some people say it doesn't make sense, but it's been around for a long time, so you can't change it.
What about the Mormons?
Mormons?
The Bible's been around a long time, and it doesn't make any sense. Didn't stop the Mormons from changing it. So, Professor, if Amazon's share price is 30 times higher than Apple, then any movement in Amazon's share price will almost certainly cancel out Apple's movements, even though Apple's the bigger company.
Correct. And like I said, it wouldn't change. 75% of Americans think there should be stricter gun control. That's a question of should crazy people have guns. And if you can't change that, well...
Kenny, is it because your party feels strongly about the Second Amendment? Yeah, the Second Amendment. And bribery, of course. Sorry? I meant lobbying. I get those two terms confused. Mr. McEnany, your president is touting this robust share market, yet Mr. Biden claims that America's 1% owns the market. Not true. Around 40% is owned by the foreign 1%. Professor, your thoughts?
Imagine the entire share market was represented by a jumbo jet.
I'm not sure if we should use a jumbo jet.
Would you prefer a train?
For one reason or another, the market does crash regularly.
Agreed. So, the train has 100 passengers.
I thought you agreed that a train is a bad analogy.
Oh, I said greed. It doesn't crash for one reason or another, It crashes because of greed. Now, these 100 passengers represent each percentile of the US population. 90 passengers own the equivalent of 2 carriages between them. The multi-millionaires own 4 carriages between them, with their share diminishing. And then there's the 1%. That one passenger that owns nearly the whole train. Post-JFK, things became more equal until Reagan. Ah yes, the great proponent of democracy.
The story was an American and a Russian arguing about their two countries, and the American said, look, in my country I can walk into the Oval Office, I can pound the president's desk and say, Mr. President, I don't like the way you're running our country. And the Russian said, I can do that. The American said, you can? He says, yes. I can go into the Kremlin to the General Secretary's office, pound his desk and say, Mr. General Secretary, I don't like the way President Reagan's running his country.
With all due respect, this wasn't the work of the Republicans. The Democrats and the Republicans pulled together to make the rich richer.
Greed. There's a point where it's less about money and more about power.
Ah yes, the Al Pacino Scarface quote. First you get the money, then you get the power. Once you got the power, then you get the women.
So people are realizing this power disparity, and they're frustrated. We're approaching the metaphorical cliff. We're in for massive social unrest unless the mega rich are properly taxed. It's actually in their interests.
Professor, economists talk about fiscal policy and monetary policy. Can you give us a quick overview?
So US dollars are a share in the US government. The government spends money and collects taxes. When they spend too much, they issue IOUs to the central bank. These IOUs are called government bonds. When times are tough, the government spends more.
And that's why we charge the Secret Service $5 for each bottle of water at Trump properties. We're actually helping out the economy.
Maybe Roosevelt's New Deal would be a better example. In order to get the US out of the Great Depression, the government spent money building infrastructure. When times are better, the money's paid back through taxes.
And monetary policy?
There's a desired rate of inflation. The central bank buys government bonds, which increases bank reserves, so the banks lend more. In order to do so, interest rates are pushed down. So this decreases the cost of borrowing. So people invest in houses, cars, hush money, businesses. If the economy heats up too much, then the government should do the opposite, so tighten monetary policy. In fact, recently the US debt went from 18 trillion to 26 trillion, with the government engaging in an aggressive form of monetary policy called quantitative easing.
First, Professor, what is quantitative easing?
It's really a form of monetary policy. The Japanese pioneered it in the 1990s. The Japanese people are prolific savers. After a stock market bubble, they dropped interest rates to increase activity in the market. Interest rates got so low that they stopped working. This is called a liquidity trap. So the central bank didn't just buy government bonds. Large companies that are deemed very low risk also issue bonds called corporate bonds. So the Japanese government bought corporate bonds from large companies that trade on their stock exchange, the Nikkei. In the case of the Trump administration, they effectively printed trillions of dollars of make-believe dollars, which went into government bonds, corporate bonds, and mortgages, or MBSs, mortgage-backed securities.
Untrue. We didn't print make-believe currency. We'd need to log down the entire Amazon to print that much currency. We just added it on, using a computer. And then with our newfound money, we bought up. It sounds like the economists and politicians have found the panacea.
There are a few bumps on the road. For example, now the Japanese government's lent money to companies irrespective of whether they're financially viable. In the case of the US, the government is buying these low-risk assets, which progressively decreases returns. So the rest of the market needs to rebalance their portfolios and search for better returns. The market starts buying shares, which are higher risk, which inflates share prices.
So at what point does this quantitative easing help the needy and the now unemployed? It seems that politicians and economists invented QE as an alternative to taxing the wealthy. Do we agree?
Greed.
Greed.
Greed.